Welcome back, everybody. It's Max from Paper Gold and Common Ground Finds with episode number 17 of Destination Unknown. Today, I am in Denver, Colorado with Lois Harvey from Westside Books and Curios. So, Lois, welcome to Paper Gold Podcast and welcome to Destination Unknown.
Well, thank you, Max. It's nice to be here. Lovely to be invited. It's a wonderful thing you're doing, I think.
Thank you. I appreciate it very much. I love talking and interviewing people who own brick and mortar bookstores. You've been around, correct me if I'm wrong, you've been around since 1997 at the store?
This incarnation was since September 1997. I started in books in about 76. And my first bookstore that I owned on my own was 1980, January 1980, which I owned until 1995.
And was that in Colorado as well?
Also in Denver, down near the Capitol. It was named Capitol Hill Books and continues to this day.
And you said you got started in 1976. Please tell us about how that journey began for you.
At that point, I was just barely out of my teens, but I actually met a guy from Boston, Massachusetts, who's living in Colorado, had come out here to ski, and he had a little bookshop on Colfax. And we became interested in each other. And I think that was the first buying trip that we went on together back to Boston. And then after that, I was helping him in his store for those years until I opened my own store in 1980, all by myself, up on East Colfax at 26. I was 26 when I opened my own shop.
So that's interesting. So you went back to Boston to start learning the process of book hunting?
Well, it was just fun, for fun. But he was John Caruso, and actually from Somerville, Mass. And
Okay.
he had been into comics and books and movie paper. And so we did a little buying sojourn, and I wouldn't say that I had gone to learn. I'd gone to have fun, and obviously learned a lot along the way. We met great people. We went to comic conventions as well as just bookstores everywhere. I was introduced to Harvard Square, which was quite an experience. Yeah.
Harvard Square back then, I'm sure you ran through Grow Your Bookshop as well.
Oh yeah. We went everywhere. It was an education just to see different shops. You're absolutely right.
So we know it's different than it is nowadays, but what was book hunting, book sourcing like before a quarter century before the internet? What was book sourcing like in the 1970s and 80s?
Well, it really was a purely individualistic endeavor. You looked for things that popped out at you. You looked for things that you thought would be fun to sell. Back in those days, we were always on the hunt for Conan the Barbarian. I don't know if you remember Conan the Barbarian, but that was hot stuff back then.
It still is.
And those old gnome, still is, I guess, in some circles. But Gnome Press had done some Conan the Barbarians. There were some ace doubles that had Conan on them. So, I'm looking for H.P. Lovecraft. I'm looking for Conan's. I'm looking for Samuel Delaney's. So because my reading was fairly broad, but had sort of focused in with this relationship with Mr. Caruso, who later became my husband. But in any case, the issue was that we were the Young Turks back then, and that was the stuff that we could sell to our generation, people like us who were interested in those kind of things.
And how were you selling it back then? Were you just selling it through his bookstore?
His little bookshop, which sold everything, posters and comics and music and books. And I actually came to work with him because I thought he was doing a very poor job with the books and that he needed my help. And those I'm sure that I've sort of always been a librarian at heart. I just wanted the
Okay.
books organized. I wanted to be able to find them. And he was not doing a great job, and I stepped in and had a wonderful time organizing books, and in the meantime got to learn about the other elements of popular culture, which I probably wasn't as well versed in. I only
Right.
knew about literature.
Right. And at this time, at this juncture of time, you were living in Massachusetts then, working with him in his bookstore and
No,
sort
no, no.
no.
That was just a visit back to see
Okay.
his family and to, yeah, no, we were Colorado people already. He'd
Okay.
come to Colorado to ski.
Right.
I'd come up from New Mexico ostensibly to go to college and dropped out pretty quickly and started doing books.
Mhm.
So,
And then when did the
boy,
idea,
this
yeah,
how did I?
when did the fruition or the idea of owning your own bookstore start coming into play?
Well, I think like Ken Sanders, I wasn't getting along with my partner very well. That was John. So I said, okay, I have to work on my own.
Hmm.
And being sort of stubborn and headstrong, that was probably part of my personality makeup. But yeah, this little shop came up as available. And I will say there was sort of a history at 306 East Colfax because that had been one of the first good bookstores I'd gone into in Denver when it was owned by Hannah and Larry Margan.
Okay.
And Hannah and Larry Margan are sort of a story in themselves. But she'd come over from Germany as a teenager during the war. He had been a bookseller in Seattle. She was there living with a family basically as a servant. And he swept her away, and they became booksellers and had bookstores all over the country, Philadelphia, Santa Fe. They'd ended up in Colorado. And I think after their two or three or four stores in Colorado, they ended up as elders back out in Santa Barbara, California, where Larry died, it is purported, in a bookstore. And Hannah continued to scout books and work for the local bookstore part-time. But that was my first experience. I think I bought a Henry Miller book in their shop. And then it was turned over to the boys, Bob Top and Mike Grano, who had the Hermitage at that point on Colfax. And then when they moved over to Cherry Creek, I moved in and became Capitol Hill Books uh, in 1980, January 1st of 1980.
And you
And the
ran,
rest is history.
and you're still going. You're still going. So,
Yeah, still
yeah,
going. I sold that in 95, but
yeah.
went on from there.
And what was the reason for selling Capitol Hill?
Um, Existential dilemma, crisis, midlife crisis. I don't know. Was uh, I was in my 40s. I thought I'd been doing this since I was a teenager. Maybe I need to do something else.
Okay.
I got out of it for about 2 minutes, and it's not that I regretted selling that store. That was that was a good a good piece of work. I learned a lot. It was a good community place. But I started doing shows and selling in book malls at that point for a little while. And then I just needed to get my feet
So,
back in the ground.
all right. So you were taking some of your better inventory and doing the show circuit and going to book shows.
Right. A
Hmm.
little bit. Not huge. But
Right.
I had started and it was in 1984 that I started on the faculty at the Colorado Antiquarian Book
Okay.
Seminar. And I think that experience, being exposed to all those folks, including um, Jake Zeitland was, I think, the first keynote speaker at the first seminar I was faculty on, and Mike Ginsberg, and just all those guys, Ed Glazer. There were some top-notch people who were in that program. Margaret Goggin was the dean of the School of Library Science at DU, and she had started the seminar with Jake Chernowski of A.B. Bookman's Weekly. And I'm sure
I
people,
remember Bookman's
do
Weekly.
you know?
I do. I started in the
Yeah,
early
Jake
I
was a
started in the
sweetheart.
yeah. I started in the early 90s and I clearly remember going through those weeklies.
Yeah, that was important stuff. So that's kind of what gave me an idea of another direction. So that's when I started doing a few shows.
Right. And then you got the itch to get back into the brick and mortar business, which is where you still are now.
Yeah, I mean, I think you find out where your heart is,
Sure.
basically. And packing and unpacking for shows was not where my heart was.
Right.
And I think Rich Moy mentioned it. You do, when you're in a shop, you become such a part of the community that your ability to buy, people bring collections and materials to you in such a way that it's not just gratifying, but it keeps you going financially. So yeah, I was able to buy collections and cream off some good stuff for sales in shows. There's a good regional show here, so I always had
Right.
stock for the show.
Right. But I think what you're saying is very important to people who still think about owning bookstores. When you own a brick and mortar, you're going to get that phone call saying, "Hey, my father passed away and he collected Civil War books." So I think one of the great advantages of the brick and mortar to this day is that you do get those phone calls.
Exactly, exactly. And you become sort of a trusted source for people whose family situations or their own personal collecting situations change.
Right.
I used to have a customer who would buy all kinds of stuff and be so excited. And then about 2 months later, he'd come in and he'd just want to sell it back. And then he would buy a whole bunch of different stuff because his I sort of felt like a book pawn shop at some point, but there are a lot of ways of buying books. You're absolutely right. There's a million ways to buy books.
This is going to be a very rabbit hole type question, but you've been around for such a long extended time selling books. You've seen a lot of changes. 1976, 2024, about to be 2025. Um, how has the experience changed for you from when you first started out to what you see now in books?
Well, obviously, I've changed a lot in that time too, but so my interests have changed, and my ability to see patterns
Mm-hmm.
is always been, I think, what was interesting to me in book selling. What has changed? Everything's changed. One of the things I never wanted to do was go into the electronic end of it. I
Okay.
didn't want to. Oh, that's actually I should be honest. That's really why I sold Capitol Hill Books. It was
Okay.
really at that time that's what needed to happen. That whole book business needed to be put into a database and uploaded to some selling venue. It needed to be the whole book selling exercise needed to be changed into an electronic exercise, and that was not what I enjoyed the most.
Right.
And it was at that time quite overwhelming in terms of what was available technically. I had people trying to build databases for me. It was such an exercise in frustration to try and get that all going that was when I said, I don't want to do this. I'm going to try something else. So the woman who I sold the bookstore to, Valerie Abney, was either smarter or more patient or had a better grasp of the whole situation. She did that.
Right.
Capitol Hill Books is online, and I think they sell a lot through Amazon, in fact, and manage that quite nicely. But that was not my bag. I didn't want to do it. So that was the first sort of major landslide of change. But yeah, definitely when I was doing shows in that little bit in there, and eBay was coming on, and the
Mhm.
first book-selling platforms were coming on, but you could still issue an electronic catalog at that time, which you could get out to individuals and librarians and do well that way. But that, I think I was just sort of like being a farm girl. You just got to keep your hands in the dirt. I just wanted to talk to people and sell books. So
Right.
that's why I went back to the brick and mortar.
So,
And that's why I have not yet gone into the other electronic, put your database in the sky and let
right.
people find books that way.
Well, let me ask a few logistical questions then about this. So, with eBay and Amazon coming in the early to mid 90s, how large was your inventory in volumes at Capitol Hill?
Oh, it's probably 60, 70,000, maybe up to 100,000.
Right.
But really good turnover, really fast turnover.
No.
Um, I think we were about 2,600 square feet at that point, plus a basement um, stock.
What's interesting to me though is you did see the vision of where books were going. You did see that having them
Where,
in a database, and whether you thought Amazon and eBay would turn into what they've turned into, you did see that technology now has a place in the book market where it
yes,
really didn't have a place before.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Brave New World. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, Huxley would be shocked and proud, I think.
Probably, probably.
It's interesting because the store that I was working in was about 100,000 volumes at that time in the early 90s. And the owner did not want to do exactly the way you felt. He did not want to go electronic. He did not want to have books online. But looking back now at 2024, at what online eBay, Amazon, and other platforms have done for books, is there any part of you that wishes you had gone down that road?
No, I I think there are lots of other very talented people doing that and who have done that. And
Right.
um, I found my curiosity and my creative impulses served elsewhere. Um, I still being on the faculty a little bit longer, gave me a view of what people were doing besides that, and and I was really impressed, but but I didn't want to do it. I think soon after I started coordinating the antiquarian book fair in Denver,
Okay.
the regional organization in Colorado has been important to me. So I will say that the associations with people have always superseded any interest I've had in the electronic or technological interface.
Yeah.
Um, so doing the book fair gave me other avenues of selling to other dealers, for one thing, and of reaching through the mails and the phone to people, for sure. Um, and then, at some point came COVID. And in fact, I've had another major shift now with COVID because West Side Books has turned into a new bookstore in a way that it never was before. It was
Okay.
always an old fashioned, people would walk in and say, "This is a real bookstore." Okay, that makes me happy. That's
Yeah.
good. And we could find things on the shelf. We didn't need a database.
Right.
Database was in your head. You knew where things were. Working at a place with 100,000 books, if you don't know what section or what shelf or when you last saw it, it's not going to work. So that was kind of the basis for the business, was that old fashioned, put your hands on it, put your eyes on it, get it for the customer. But with COVID, we couldn't have people in browsing. We weren't able to do the same business. I made a decision that we would make a radical flip into New Book World, because there was now the kind of easier to access technology for someone like me who didn't want to do it themselves. I can plug into New Book World technology database web access, order it online. Yeah, now we have orders online every day that are for new books, and then people can inquire about our used books. And I do foresee a day where we'll go into the big database in the sky with the used books, because it is all changed. Things are not as complicated as they used to be. So for, as Ken says, a Luddite like me, there's the accessibility is a little different.
Right. I think that in the 90s or even the 80s, a rare book back then is not a rare book anymore, because now with eBay and
True.
Amazon and the internet, um, those rare copies of books, now we realize that a lot of people have them.
Right. No, and people walk into the bookstore now with their phones out,
Right.
checking on prices, checking on
Sure.
condition. And so selling a book is a different thing in person as well because of the internet. So yeah, it's required a little quick step here and there to stay in business and to keep the customers happy.
So so your customer base, when they call you, and they're looking for a book that you don't have in your new inventory, are you now ordering it from the publisher for them?
We certainly do that. What more often happens, Max, is somebody calls for a book and they, maybe because they know us as a used bookstore, they hope they'll find a used copy,
Okay.
and we don't have one. And
Mhm,
maybe we have a new copy now. New
right.
books have helped us keep our customers
Mhm,
a little longer, interested in us a little longer. So if we don't have a new copy, yes, we can order you a new copy. We can look for a used, rare, unusual copy for you. Our booksellers, and we're a team of about 6 now. We all know how to look for a book. And if it's in the store on the shelf, if it's ordering it from our new book distributor, if it's looking in the secondary market on, and I use Adall. I try to stay away from Amazon as much
mhm.
as possible. And I won't order from Amazon. I
Okay.
won't order used books from Amazon. I won't order new books from Amazon. So I'm trying to seduce those customers who are Amazon addicts to come toward us a little more. And we do try to do everything. I have a customer I try to find 4-edge books for.
Okay.
I have a customer I try to find old and unusual Alice in Wonderland for. I have sold archives of Buckminster Fuller to institutions, or so it's not like being just a used bookstore limits us. I will
Mhm,
say we
right.
have to be able to access the world too.
Right. So I mean, you are electronic, as you like to say. You are doing it for the customer base. You're helping them find books that they're desiring.
Right.
Mhm.
We use the electronic technological world
Okay.
as if
And
it's natural to us.
you talked a little bit about how COVID has changed West Side Books and Curios. Just tell me a little bit about the
Oh,
bookstore. Tell me a little bit about the bookstore. Do you specialize in anything in the antiquarian section? Tell me about the curios portion of the bookstore.
uh, the curios portion of the bookstore came out of the fact that when I re-entered book world after being out for that short time, my brother and I were partners, came in as partners in West Side Books and Curios. My brother is a professional musician. He is not a bookseller. He's not a business person, but he's pretty damn smart. And he's always collected antiques of one sort or another, art, um,
Mhm,
ceramics, silver, glass, art stuff. So Jim's part of the business was the curios, all the fun stuff that was non-book. And in the shop we had first in 1997, up the street, we had some fantastic art and curio pieces. When we moved down the street to what had been a transmission shop, which had much more space and was a much cheaper buy-in at that point. The curios gradually receded, making room for the books, which I will tell you, books will take every conceivable inch they can find. And so the curios became less, the books became more, but we keep that in the name because we still do sell a few things here and
Right.
there, including maps. We have maps, old maps right now on consignment from our friends at the Old Map Gallery.
Okay.
Curtis and Alana Bird have a bin of great old maps that we sell every now and then too.
And so do you do does your shop now do a lot of consignments?
No, very few. Um, uh, the original owner of Old Map Gallery was Paul Mahoney, who was my book fair chairman when I was doing the book fair as a coordinator. And I learned so much from Paul. Paul had been in mapping for the government, and he had a really great work ethic. And he would tell the committee, okay, people, go home and do your homework. And then we'd meet the next time and we'd all be ready because Paul was such an inspiration. So
Right.
when Paul retired, he sold his shop to Curtis, his young assistant, who's a delight and was newly married and all that stuff. So Curtis continued in the shop for a while, and then before COVID, sold his space downtown, which was a fabulous space, and moved into working from his home, which was lucky because he's been working from home, of course, all through COVID, issuing catalogs, buying and selling on eBay. He's a hot ticket, and his kids are hot tickets too. But in any case, those guys have brought me maps to sell
Okay.
because they do not have an open shop to
Mhm.
sell from. This is a very rare and unusual situation. I really
Okay.
don't necessarily want to handle other people's stuff, but Curtis is an exception.
Understood. And does the store now specialize though in are
Oh,
you into Western Americana? I mean, is there a specialty that you personally like to have in the shop?
I like everything is the problem. And Western Americana, yeah, I can sell a little bit of that. I know something about that. Uh, Illustrated books, children's books, I like those. I can sell those. Basically, it comes down to specialties have to do with what are interests of the owners and the booksellers who are there. I think that's really the answer to your question.
Right.
And my interests have changed. At one point, I was collecting um, narratives by women travelers. And
Okay.
so that's great. You just can't get enough of them to sell very many. So you have to broaden your field a little bit. And
Right.
I collect Alice in Wonderland. So I get as many old Alice in Wonderland as I could and I'd sell those. So we have no specialty. I'm sorry, Max. We just have no specialty. I I I love the fact that I'm a generalist and I apologize for it at the same time. It's like, well, you should have something that's a specialty. No, not really. We like books.
So are you still do you still have a penchant for the Alice in Wonderland volumes? Are you still collecting those?
Yeah, to a certain extent, but it it comes to a point where you can have as much pleasure in the selling of it and the passing it on part
Mhm.
as the collecting of it. So even this fairly odd bits that I have in my own collection are probably just going to go out for sale pretty soon, I think. Every now and then I go to a flea market for fun or an estate sale for fun. I do have a few scouts who bring me things from
Mhm.
estate sales and flea markets and garage sales. Um, I'm just getting old enough that I don't do that with as
Right.
much vigor as I used to do. So um, I do occasionally go to other shops. I have friends in the business who'll say, "Hey, I just got this in. Are you interested?" And I do the same to them with them. So how do I source things? I don't do eBay. I've never had the patience for being an eBay shopper. I'm not that much of an insomniac. I think you have to be an insomniac to do eBay. That's,
I do
maybe
it.
you'll
I
have to
do it.
answer that
You know, I
question for
do
me.
it, and it is constant. It's a constant business.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So um, I've gotten a little lazier. I like to let the books come to me. That's plenty of work. That's a lot of work,
Yeah.
actually, just to have the books coming in the way they do.
And so let me
You
let
know,
me
I'll
ask.
ask
Yeah.
Rich Morey if he has a book, or Ken Sanders.
Right.
I'll shop my friends before I shop other places.
And you did mention earlier you have about 6 employees.
No, the staff total six. There's
Okay.
probably three that are full-time and two that are part-time and me. And I work a lot, but not full-time anymore I don't think. So,
Yeah. And so give me the logistics when books come into the shop. How do you go about with your employees pricing books for the shop?
well, that's a little tricky. I generally, well, it's one of the beauties of new books. New books are checked in and priced, and they are what they are.
Right.
I'm still sort of stuck on the fact that I have to buy the books and I have to price them. And I'm
Okay.
slowly letting people learn to price, but I I have felt like for a sense of continuity in the shop, I need to be the one pricing. So a lot of the time I spend at the store these days is pricing, talking to customers, selling special customers more special things.
Yeah.
Um,
It is tough to let go of that responsibility.
they're going to learn.
Yeah, it's tough.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
It is. It is.
And
I'm sure you saw that.
yeah, I price everything for myself, and it's so hard to let go of the knowledge that we acquired in our time doing this, because there's so many
Mhm,
variables in pricing. So I find that a
mhm.
little bit difficult. When you were out there sourcing, going to flea markets and doing that, you have any great stories of any great finds?
Oh gosh. I think the best stories I have are the books that have come to me that have been good, like the Buckminster Fuller or um the Ken Kesey collection, all signed and inscribed with some letters, and just those kind of things that have come because we've built a reputation as being honest and reputable and
Right.
interested in unusual things. Um, yeah, they're from the old days of garage sales and flea markets. I think running across a huge collection of old science fiction paperbacks was really exciting. I remember the excitement of that. There were some titles there I'd never seen and some interesting things to know about. Just that was the fun of it, just knowing about something new and different.
Right.
But I will say that I don't really consider myself a rare books person.
Mhm.
I really do like general use books is what I
You
like
do?
with that occasional, oh, look at this kind of experience. I
Even
swear to
when you
God, that's a signed one.
even when you talk about it,
Go ahead.
you glow. You glow when you say general. You get excited about that.
Yeah.
So, couple more questions for
It's
you.
it's always an adventure.
Yeah, a couple more
Sure.
questions for you. I run a Patreon group called Paper Gold, an ongoing book hunters conversation, and we have just about 150 members in that group worldwide. And there are several members who do want to open up bookshops. Do you have any advice to anybody who in 2024 wants to open up a bookshop?
4 or 5 years ago, I would have said don't. Now I say the opposite. Do that. Try that. I've seen a lot of new shops open up, even in Denver. We had a lovely young couple from McAllen, Texas, visit the other day who had just opened a shop down there. And I'm thinking, oh, that might be a tough sell. But I think when you feel the need to enter into and create community, a bookshop is a wonderful way to do it. It's not necessarily, I will tell anyone who's going into it, it's not necessarily going to make you much money or even a decent living for a while. but it's very satisfying, and it can make you a decent living. But I often have told people who wanted to open shops, you might want to have a spouse or a partner who has a real job. And I hate saying that, because being a bookseller is a real job. It's a real um, it's a real enterprise. It's a real labor of love. It's real knowledge. It's real work. It's damn work, damn lot of work. Um, but it's not always great money. And so having somebody who is going to have an insurance policy, or a personal insurance policy, those kind of things can be quite helpful when you're starting out, at least, and you might work into another point where you can make that all a go on your own. But it's a slow starting business, but a satisfying one. So I guess I just want to make sure that people aren't going into it with their rose-colored glasses on all the time. You can have them on for a little bit, but
Yeah.
be realistic about it too. You need
I
some
can, yeah,
capital. You need to know how to work
yeah.
with money.
I can say this though, with all the interviews I've done so far, most most of the booksellers, their answer is always yes, to definitely be open to wanting to open a bookstore. But the one thing they all have said, it's important to be part of the community. That's the joy they get out of it, is
Yes,
being being entrenched in the roots of the community.
absolutely. And community can mean a lot of things. I do think it's important to be aware of and appreciative of and involved in your book selling community also, but
Mhm.
that your real community, the school down the street, or the book clubs that meet, or the knitting clubs that need some place to go to hang out and knit and talk. The the community
Right.
is essential in keeping readership alive,
Mm.
and keeping books alive, um, and keeping what the whole idea of books alive because books are a communicative device. They are some a way in which creative people and thinking people and reflective people have sought to express and share something. And so your job as a bookseller is to continue that, I think, and evolve it, because it's going to evolve.
Yeah.
It's a
It
fun
it
part
doesn't, yeah,
too.
it doesn't stop. It doesn't stop.
I'm glad that's the experience you've had.
Yeah. All right. So
Now,
I have one more question for you. It's the question that everybody gets. You are episode number 17 of Destination Unknown. Where are you sending me off for episode 18?
so this is incredibly hard, Max, to to choose where to send you, because one of those things I just spoke of, being part of a book community,
Mhm.
whether all those years of doing the fairs, just being in our community, in some ways, I want to send you to Timbuktu or to Mexico or the guy I know in Colombia, but I just feel like my own backyard, my own backyard has been my richest pickings
Okay.
always. And I think um, my mother was a public health nurse, and we got to go visit people in the community with her when we were little, and she'd go on these home visits. And I think it really is reinforced for me now in my later ages. Home is where you are. And I
Okay.
want to send you to Englewood, Colorado, in my backyard, to
Okay.
visit with Carol Mobley. Carol Mobley, who has a history of having been back east, uh, staunch member and maybe even important in the Ephemera Society with her husband, Bill, who's recently passed away, a big loss. But Carol Mobley has an ephemera business, and she's been running postcard shows here in Denver. She's been part of the paper world for a long time, and she runs the Rocky Mountain Book and Paper Fair now for us here in Colorado, and does a wonderful job, which is a show that I think is a good entree sometimes. Local regional shows are good entrees for young booksellers too. And I want to say that
Mhm.
to your people out there in paper mania world. Keep a lookout on the local shows. And
Yeah.
Carol is such a kind and knowledgeable and important person in our community that I want to send you there to talk.
I want to thank you for your time today and allowing me to interview you on your book selling journey.
Well, thank you. It was a pleasure, and I know you'll keep enjoying this process you and this journey you've taken yourself on. It's great.
Thank you.
Sorry for
Yeah.
the technical difficulties, though. I hope it comes out okay.
Oh, it will be fine. Thank you, Lois, and have a great
Thanks, Max. Bye bye.